Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. With U.S. President Joe Biden expected to arrive in Canada soon, both PM Justin Trudeau and CPC leader Pierre Poilievre explained which big issues they want to address. The Alberta government announced a huge investment into affordable housing. Seniors and Social Services Minister Nixon has the details. And a Lethbridge school was recreated in Lego style. BCN's Micah Quinn will have that story.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre outlined his expectations ahead of U.S. President Joe Biden's first official visit to Canada as president. Poilievre says the issue of tariffs needs to be addressed as the Biden administration continues to penalize our softwood lumber industry.
Conservatives were able to get an end to the illegal softwood lumber tariffs the Americans had imposed within 3 months of Prime Minister Harper taking office. After Trudeau took office, the Americans slapped those tariffs back on our lumber, and they've been there ever since. Trudeau has since had 6 years, and he hasn't been able to do what Harper did in 3 months. We want an end to softwood lumber tariffs so that our forestry workers can get bigger, more powerful, inflation-proof paychecks.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau also chatted with reporters about what the focus of his discussion will be with U.S. President Joe Biden when he visits Ottawa.
The center of our conversations will be about jobs and growth, critical minerals, and fighting climate change, and continuing to build an economy across our continent that works for all of our citizens. The big message is just going to be how we can and will be working together.
Not your message, his message.
But his message as well, the message from both of us, and why we are focused on creating jobs and fighting climate change and creating growth together. The message that we can do things and we will be doing things together as North Americans to actually deliver that.
You know, many Canadians are pretty upset that the federal carbon tax is going up on April the 1st, especially when they see our Prime Minister flying around the world in a huge jet, which leaves behind a very large carbon footprint. Some are saying his message is as empty as the plane he's using. That's according to political reporter Brian Lilly.
Last week, the Prime Minister was, he landed in Toronto, and rather than have him drive back, they flew the plane empty from Toronto to Kitchener to save the Prime Minister an hour's car ride. So the plane flying empty to save the Prime Minister driving time. But what's the carbon footprint of that? Well, for his jet, it's a lot bigger than for his SUV. So it doesn't jive with it at all. But with Justin Trudeau, it's about optics. It's not about reality.
Make sure you catch the full interview with political reporter Brian Lilly and BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up in the second half of our program. Representatives from the First Nations Finance Authority talked about the upcoming March 28th federal budget and how Ottawa can improve infrastructure for First Nations.
An AFN report estimates an infrastructure gap between First Nation communities and municipalities at $349.2 billion. And this gap is increasing, not closing. This unreserved gap has developed over generations due to Canada's annual budget method, a cash spending approach. No level of other government uses this approach. I am joined this week by chiefs and councillors from communities in all provinces who want to begin the urgent task of improving life in First Nation communities.
The Trudeau government committed to closing an infrastructure gap for First Nations communities by the year 2030. Federal Families Minister Karina Gould says Ottawa has now completely eliminated the backlog of passport applications that caused major delays last year. She says Canadians who provide an email address will also now be able to check the status of their Service Canada application online.
And today, passports are delivered within the service standards over 99% of the time. This work also got us ready for the growth in volume we expect this year as the first passports with 10-year validity become eligible for renewal. Starting today, if you have applied for a passport and provided your email address, you'll be able to check the status of the application at canada.ca/passport-status. To To put into perspective how helpful a tool like this can be, the Passport call center received over 15.6 million calls from April 2022 until the end of February. And of those calls answered, just over 70% were related to the status of an application.
Well, it was great to see lots of sunshine again across much of southwestern Alberta today. Jeanette Rocher is now with a quick peek at the forecast. Jeanette, it was nice and mild today, and Thursday we could see the potential of double-digit temperatures once again.
Yeah, well, we were supposed to hit those double digits today, too. I don't think we quite got there. We were expecting a high of 10 degrees, but you're right. Thursday, we are looking at the potential of 11 degrees. Hopefully, we will get there. A beautiful sunny day as well. Now, this evening, we are looking at more fog developing. I know we've had quite a foggy week, especially in the morning. So it's going to happen again overnight and then should be dissipating early in the morning, leaving way for those nice clear skies and that high of 11 degrees, along with a 20K wind that will be gusting to 40 and 60K tomorrow. So it could be a bit of a windy one, but should have clear skies all the way till the weekend. I'll be back later in the show to give you that full 7-day local forecast, as well as a peek at the national forecast. Hal?
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. The Alberta government announced new affordable housing partnership projects for our province. Seniors, Community and Social Services Minister Jeremy Nixon says more Albertans need a place to call home. He says the UCP will be investing $66 million taxpayer dollars to create 410 new units of housing.
These aren't just single units. These are also units for families with multiple bedrooms to help meet a great and growing need within our communities. I'm excited about this announcement because I know what this means for so many in our community. This funding has been allocated to projects in our urban centres for Calgary and Edmonton, including $4 million to Fresh Start Recovery, where we are here today. Of course, $14.9 million to Savita as they build more units in Edmonton, $6.5 million into Jasper to support families, and $3.2 million to provide transitional housing in Wetaskiwin. Funding for today's announcement is made possible through a focus on affordable housing in Budget 2023, but also because of strong partnerships in our community, strong partnerships across government boundaries, working with our federal as well as our municipal partners, but also strong partnerships with our not-for-profit organizations.
The Alberta NDP is blasting Premier Daniel Smith and the UCP over their spending habits. Figures released by Alberta's official opposition party shows the government spent more than $4 million tax dollars on advertising in January and February alone. They say that's roughly a 614% increase compared to the same period in 2022. The NDP says that brings the UCP's total advertising spending to more than $9 million. They say Albertans are paying for Daniel Smith's election campaign.
That's exactly what's happening, that Danielle Smith's UCP is using taxpayer money to prop up their re-election campaign. And back in the day when Danielle Smith was in opposition, she criticized then Premier Red for spending $1.3 million just before the election. And now they're spending crazy amount of money just to prop up their election campaign. That is offside, and that is absolutely unacceptable.
Alberta Deputy Premier and Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Neudorf says the money that's being spent on the ads Albertans are seeing are in connection to government help that's available.
Well, I'd like to set the record straight. This is about reaching Albertans and making sure they have the information that they need to access the affordability payments to help them through this time. This is for seniors, families with children, those with disabilities, and a lot of people who live in Alberta where English isn't their first language. We've all experienced phone scams and fraudulent activities over the phone lines. It's the government of Alberta's responsibility to make sure that Albertans have the information they need to access the supports that they deserve during this high time of inflation.
Well, the Alberta election is coming up on May the 29th. There are some who feel that our province should separate from Canada. You can include Ed Callio in that group. Ed is the leader of the Alberta First Party, which is seeking official party status. He says Alberta needs to go on its own way, considering how Ottawa keeps attacking our energy and agriculture sectors.
The two largest sectors in our economy are targets of the federal government, and we can't allow that to persist. So I look at the numbers. I've got a background in energy economics and a legal background. So I understand the constitutional underpinnings and the economics. And it's a crap deal for Alberta, and we need to get out.
Mr. Kallio will explain how Alberta will be able to stand on its own 2 feet as a separate and sovereign nation. That's coming up after Business News. A Lethbridge man who suffered from terrible back pain for more than 4 decades is believed to be the first patient in Canada to undergo spinal surgery while conscious. Surgeon Dr. Michael Yang says he performed Todd Benet's procedure in February at the Foothills Medical Centre in Calgary with a local anesthetic only. According to Alberta Health Services, general anesthesia can result in nausea and other complications that typically require patients to stay in hospital for a few days. Remarkably, after only 4 hours following his surgery, Benet was able to make his way home.
This is really collaboration with our anesthesiologist colleagues and be able to do this operation in awake patients so that we reduce the stress of the anesthesia on the patient and be able to do the surgery in a very minimally invasive way, just a 2-centimeter incision, and be able to target that disc pathology and get that out to give him relief after his operation.
I get up in the morning, I cook my grandkids breakfast and everything else. It got to where I couldn't even do that anymore. Just the pain was too much. Without that pain, it's just tremendous how much difference it is.
Dr. Yang says fully awake surgery means eligible patients are able to recover faster, go home sooner, and have less risk of post-op complications. 2 people have now been charged in connection with a shooting that took place on Monday morning at a Westside City home. Lethbridge police say 38-year-old Christina Hatcher of Lethbridge and 41-year-old Robert Vincent of Claresholm face a wide range of charges, including assault with a weapon, aggravated assault, and theft of a vehicle. Police say their investigation revealed that a 54-year-old man confronted his ex-girlfriend Hatcher along with Vincent inside of the home when a fight ensued. Police allege that Hatcher shot the victim and Vincent also assaulted the man before they both fled in his truck. They were arrested a short time later in the day by LPS. Both Hatcher and Vincent were remanded in custody. Hatcher appeared in court to answer to the charges on Wednesday, and Vincent will be in court on March the 28th. Over 400 members from the Blood Tribe are now using a new mobile communications app through the Kainai Nation. The app was launched on February 17th and is meant to help residents who are looking for more information, including new job opportunities. An official with the Blood Tribe says development of the app began shortly after the pandemic.
We've been thinking about the app for a little while now. The pandemic, we really saw how people, how remote people were and to access that information. So having an app would benefit our members who live in rural areas, who live off reserve, and are able, this would give them the opportunity to access that information.
Blood says more residents are signing up daily, and it's available to download on either the iPhone or an Android device. Now, here's a cool story you don't see or hear about every day. Emily LeBaron and her son Isaac have created a Lego reconstruction of Wilson Middle School here in Lethbridge. The Lego masterpiece took the mother and son around 3 months to complete. BCN's Micah Quinn chatted with LeBaron about how you're never too old to build Lego.
I've read that interest in Lego has gone up 20% in the past year, and that COVID was really one of the reasons for that, is that people were at home looking for creative outlets, and this is kind of a fun hobby and a rewarding experience to be able to create and to build something that's unique.
Emily LeBaron and her son Isaac have a love for Lego that runs deep. The mother and son duo worked together to enter their Lego Wilson Middle School project into this year's Lethbridge School Division Lego Challenge. LeBaron says she thought of little details like Peter Pan on the stage from her own experience as a staff member at Wilson Middle School.
The school did Peter Pan this year, so when we were building the gym and we made the stage, we're like, well, of course we have to have Peter Pan on the stage, because that's the reality of what the kids saw this year.
The Lego Group Toy Company was founded in 1932, and the word Lego is an abbreviation of the 2 Danish words leg, got, which means play well. LeBaron outlined the size and scale of the Lego piece for us.
And it did end up being 5 feet by 3 feet. It took about 2,500 pieces, and we have about 75 minifigures in there. And Wilson has about 700 students. So I figure this is maybe a 1/10 of what a day in the life of school looks like.
The winners of this year's Lego Challenge are set to be announced at the end of March. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Well done. That is very cool. Colehurst will have a new chief administrative officer in May. Sean Patience will take the role as the town's new CAO. He will oversee town administration and employees, ensuring that they provide effective services to the community, plans for growth, and deliver on council's key focus areas. Patience says he's excited about this new opportunity and brings a lot to the table.
I've got a very long background in local and regional economic development that I think will be a very positive attribute for the town of Colehurst. And I also have a fairly strong planning background. I hold a certificate of land use planning from the U of A in addition to my NACL certification. And as the community grows, I think both of those facets will serve not only myself, but the council very well in the town of Colehurst.
Patience recently served as the CAO in the newly established Diamond Valley region. He also previously served 4 terms on municipal council in Fort Macleod, including 3 as mayor. Seedy Sunday is a chance to learn about gardening, local food, and the environment. The annual event put on by Environment Lethbridge will feature 18 local businesses as exhibitors. Kathleen Shepard, the executive director of the organization, says more people are hoping to learn about growing their own food as the cost of living continues to rise.
I think there's been a lot of interest in gardening, coming out of that pandemic. A lot of people kind of got started, and now, as you say, with the inflation being high, people are sort of looking at different options. And Seedy Sunday, really, if you haven't gardened before, or maybe you have gardened but you've struggled, this is a great way to come down and talk to some people who have some expertise. So we're going to have the Lethbridge Horticulture Society will be there. We have local arborists. We have an exhibitor who's an expert in soil. So it's a really great way to get started.
Seedy Sunday will take place at CASA on April 2nd from 1 till 4 p.m. The Edmonton Valley Zoo has released medical information which says that an Asian elephant named Lucy cannot be moved. This despite demands from animal rights groups for years that she be transferred to a sanctuary. The zoo said it's been working closely with the animal advocacy group Free the Wild since 2022.
The key observation or the key findings was a conclusion that had been drawn by previous experts that had been here before, and that is that she does have a severe breathing issue, a respiratory challenge. And it's something that has caused previous experts that have examined her to warn against moving her from our zoo. The stress associated with that travel could be life-threatening and would be life-threatening for her. They had hoped to uncover or diagnose exactly what the cause of this respiratory issue is, because it has been a mystery. We know that after just a short bit of exercise, she has to gasp for breath, and we'd love to know what's the cause of it.
Praying for the best for Lucy. Well, if you've been praying for lots of sunshine, your prayers were answered here in southwestern Alberta. We had lots of sun mixed with cloud and fairly mild in the city. And fortunately, the warmer temperatures will be sticking around. Complete weather details are coming up. It may be time to dust off and pull off that barbecue cover here in southwestern Alberta and fire up the grill with this nice, mild spring we're experiencing so far. Jeanette Roche is in now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, it looks like barbecue season may have begun here in Lethbridge. Well, at least at the Roberts household.
Okay, well, if that's the case, then I'll be right over, Hal. But you are right. Definitely the smell of barbecue has been filling the air throughout the neighborhoods. And why not with these lovely temperatures? As we're looking ahead to Thursday, we're seeing sunshine, high of 11 degrees. There we go. Will we make it? Well, we'll find out soon enough tomorrow. 6 degrees the high for Friday. We should see those clear skies remaining right through till Friday night, when we'll see a 30% chance of showers or flurries. Into Saturday, though, mainly cloudy skies, 2 degrees the high, and then only a -2 for a high on Sunday. We could see those 60% chance of some flurries on Sunday as well. So it could be a ski day, who knows. 0 is the high on Monday, and then up to 5 degrees on Tuesday. So we're seeing everything from high of double digits down to minuses, but we're still staying basically in this range. A high of 7 degrees is the average high for this time of year. Average low -6, 22. That was our high temperature on this day back in 1939. And guess what happened in 1966? It was minus 22. Okay, 7:31, that's when the sun rose this morning. Our sun set this evening, 7:46 p.m. That means we are now in 12 hours and 15 minutes of daylight. Over on the west coast tomorrow, looking at periods of rain throughout the day in Victoria, 30% chance in the morning, 70% chance in the afternoon. Looking at 70K winds in the Juan de Fuca Strait, high of 9 degrees. 9 also the expected high in Vancouver tomorrow, also seeing periods of rain there and 50K winds near the water. 8 degrees the high in Edmonton and 7 the high in Calgary. Mainly sunny skies across most of Alberta, and same thing for the rest of the prairies as we look to Saskatoon. High of 0, mainly sunny skies. 0 also the high in Regina and -4 in Winnipeg. But again, looking at those wind chill values, close to -22 and -25 in those cities as well on the prairies. 11 degrees the expected high in Toronto tomorrow, looking at some periods of rain. Freezing rain actually in effect. A warning is in effect for both Ottawa and Montreal tomorrow. 6 degrees the high in Ottawa. 4 is the expected high in Montreal. Both of those cities looking at periods of freezing rain and rain by the afternoon there. So 1 degree the expected high in Fredericton, seeing 5 centimeters of snow, 2 to 4 centimeters of snow expected in Halifax, also a high of 1 there. 0 the expected high tomorrow in Charlottetown, looking at 2 centimeters of snow and periods of flurries in St. John's, Newfoundland tomorrow, -1 the high there. So there you have it.
Today's weather report is brought to you by Ridge Utilities, providing competitive rates for electricity, natural gas, and internet, while investing back in communities across southern Alberta.
A new fast food giant will be making its way to Canada. Shake Shack from the United States will be opening up a chain known for its juicy burgers and handmade milkshakes in Toronto over the next few years. Company officials say they plan to open 35 locations across Canada by the year 2035. Shake Shack currently has 440 locations around the world. An official with a New York-based fast food brand says they've been eyeing Canada for quite some time and will feature Canada-exclusive items on its menu. A recent report by the Royal Bank says Canada needs to add 332,000 rental units over the next few years to reach an optimal vacancy rate of 3%. The study says without a big boost in stock, our country's rental housing shortage will quadruple to 120,000 units by the year 2026. Canada's rental housing stock grew by 2.4% last year, but the vacancy rate fell to its lowest point in 21 years at just 1.9%. Competition for rental units also increased. The average rent for a 2-bedroom unit went up by 5.6%, the highest increase in rent growth on record. Officials with Canada Soccer addressed the Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage in Ottawa to discuss the ongoing labor dispute with the women's and men's national teams. The group outlined a proposed deal on the table and defended the deal involving marketing and sponsorship rights.
From 2012 to 2019, player compensation was $2.92 million for the men and $2.96 million for the women. As the national teams have grown and have enjoyed success, they have been paid as such. Canada Soccer is committed to delivering equal pay and ensuring the environments for both of our national teams are built for success. Based on those principles, in June 2022, Canada Soccer first offered a framework for the same collectively bargained agreements to the players of both national teams. The proposed agreements will pay players on both teams the same amount for playing a 90-minute match and will share total competition prize money equally between the teams.
Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 122 points on the day to finish at 19,532. The Dow was down 530 points to 32,030. The S&P 500 was down 65 on the day to 3936, and the Nasdaq was down 190 points to 11,669. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 25 cents to $69.92 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 18 cents to $2.17 US. Gold was up $30.03 on the day to $19.70.11 US an ounce, and silver was down 2 cents to $22.97 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $11.16 per bushel, barley's at $8.97, canola's at $16.12, and corn is at $10.54 per bushel. Live cattle April contract was down 13 cents to 162.30. Feeder cattle March contract was down 53 cents to 188.25. And lean hogs April contract was down 98 cents to 76.08. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 72.82 US. Recapping one of our top stories, the Alberta government announced a new affordable housing partnership projects for our province. Minister of Seniors, Community and Social Services Jeremy Nixon says more Albertans need a place to call home. Nixon says the UCP will be investing $66 million to create 410 new units of housing. You know, as the federal tax is set to go up on April the 1st, there are a large number of Canadians who are not happy hearing how much flying Justin Trudeau is doing with a large carbon-emitting jet. You can include political analyst Brian Lilly in that group. He'll have details for us momentarily. Listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you.
An election threat and testimony about alleged Chinese interference, challenging the No More Pipelines bill and the Prime Minister's supposed empty plane. Here to chat about all of this in more detail is political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly. Brian, great to have you on again.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we've had weeks of drama, a filibuster, an election threat, all over stopping Katie Telford, the Prime Minister's chief of staff, from testifying about alleged China's election interference. So Tuesday morning, that all stopped. So Brian, what changed?
Well, it seemed like everything changed in the matter of an hour or so, Jeanette. On Monday, we're in high drama. It wasn't just, one or two media outlets reporting, hey, the Liberals are threatening election if Katie Telford's forced to testify. It was everybody. That's how they took what the Liberals were saying. They were asked, is this going to be a confidence vote? The Conservatives had a motion calling for Telford to testify. That was going to be voted on Tuesday afternoon, and the Liberals could make it a confidence motion. And that means if the motion passed, which means the government loses, then we could be headed for an election. Suddenly, the Prime Minister comes out and makes an announcement and says on his way into cabinet, this is not going to be a confidence vote. And then he says, and by the way, David Johnson's mandate will be out later today. And then while he's in cabinet, a news release comes out saying Katie Telford will testify. And it comes from the Prime Minister's office. So they've been blocking his chief of staff from answering questions about what she knew, what she told the Prime Minister about allegations of China's election interference. They've been blocking this for weeks. The Procedure and House Affairs Committee at the House of Commons has barely been able to do anything else because the Liberals just keep trying to block the vote by talking as long as they can. As long as they keep talking, there's no vote. They'll just say, Madam Chair, we have another point to raise. Let's talk about this. And then they talk for 20 minutes and then somebody else does. They've been embarrassing themselves. They've been making themselves look guilty. And then suddenly, the Prime Minister's office says Telford will testify. I don't know why they went to these lengths when even the Toronto Star was saying, looks like you got something to hide when you're doing this. The Liberals are in bad shape, but that's where they were. And so, after weeks of filibustering, weeks of delay, they're going to let her testify. There's no election threat anymore. And it looks like we'll just proceed towards finding out about a public inquiry at a later date. But a lot of high drama for nothing. I mean, the balloon was deflated early in the morning by the Prime Minister making a couple of decisions he could have easily made weeks ago.
Wow, lots and lots of drama. Okay, but Brian, when the Liberals were still trying to stop Telford from testifying, they claimed that having her appear would be unprecedented. But you actually investigated the matter and found several chiefs of staff have testified in the past. So why are they claiming that it's unprecedented now?
It's utterly bizarre. They just kept saying, well, Pierre Poilievre opposed political staffers testifying in 2010, and so Telford can't testify. They made it sound like it was the end of democracy. But of course, she testified in July 2020 into the We Charity scandal. She testified in April of 2021 into allegations about sexual misconduct in the military. And I quoted her right off the top of one of my columns. I quoted her and I can't give you the exact quotes, not in front of me, but it was to the effect of, "Thank you for having me here today. I look forward to answering all your questions." There was none of this drama. But the position of chief of staff only goes back to the Mulrooney era in '87. And I counted Norman Spector, who was one of Mulrooney's chiefs of staff. He testified. 3 of Harper's chiefs of staff. He had 4, but 3 of the 4 of them testified. And as I said, Telford twice. This is not unusual. But they obviously wanted to stop her from speaking on this issue. And I'll try and explain why briefly, Jeanette. The belief is that Telford is the one that CSIS went to in September 2019 when they had concerns about a then Liberal candidate and now Liberal MP. It's been identified by some media as Han Dong. He's the Liberal MP for Don Valley North. So Trudeau's never denied that CSIS came to him. He said things like it's racist to ask questions, CSIS doesn't get to choose. He's never denied that CSIS gave his party a briefing. It's believed that Telford took that briefing. And so what MPs want to know from all the opposition parties is, well, what did they tell you? What did you tell the Prime Minister? What did you do about it? Because if CSIS is warning you that you've got a candidate who is compromised, you might want to say, okay, well, this person shouldn't run for us. Instead, they never did that. And in fact, they hid all of what they were told. This has not shown up in any of the public reports that we have. So I think they were worried about that information coming out and perhaps more. And that's why they've been so adamant that she not appear and making it sound like this has never happened before when clearly it has.
Wow, so much to uncover there. Okay, so Brian, David Johnston was announced as Trudeau's special rapporteur last week, and his mandate is now out. So when he was announced, you said that he's a man of integrity, but the wrong choice. So why did you say that?
Well, look, I thought David Johnston was a fine Governor General, and I'd met him prior to him being appointed. He actually did a similar job for Stephen Harper when Brian Mulroney was facing allegations from Karl-Heinz Schreiber, and Stephen Harper called the Airbus Inquirer, or the Oliphant Commission as it became known. David Johnston was chosen to say, okay, you decide on the terms of reference. But David Johnston and Stephen Harper weren't longtime friends. They didn't have a history. You can't say that with Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau has called him a family friend. Johnston has talked about how he's known Justin since Justin Trudeau was 6 years old, that the Johnston families and the Trudeau families would go skiing together north of Montreal. This is a real Laurentian elite, cozy club, Jeanette. They didn't look far beyond a very cozy circle. And look, I think Johnston is a man of integrity, but there's a few problems there. You're that close to the Prime Minister. Can you be objective? And even if you can, will people believe that you're objective? I think that is something that is of concern. If he doesn't come out with a recommendation for a strong public inquiry, how many people are going to say, well, there's those Laurentian elite buddies looking after each other again. There's the Ottawa Club constantly looking after its own. So that's part of the problem. The other problem is, he doesn't know the ins and outs of ground level politics, which is what this is all about. Nomination meetings and how do you stack them and how do you influence them? He's an academic. He doesn't know this world. So that's one of the other problems that many have pointed out about this guy.
That's interesting. Okay, Brian, last week it was a claim of election interference in Vancouver, and today Ontario Premier Doug Ford answered questions about CSIS briefing his government. So Ford said that he didn't find out much from CSIS. So Brian, what can you tell us?
So the Ford government says we didn't know anything about the MPP that news reports allege was part of this foreign interference network. By the way, the man's named Vincent Ke. He represents the same riding, but provincially as the gentleman I just mentioned earlier. So the same riding, federal and provincial representatives, different parties. The allegation is they were both part of this election interference network. Mr. Ke denies all allegations against him. The Ford government's response is, nobody told us. We found out from the media. We found out when a reporter started calling and emailing and asking questions. And then once the report came out, they went to CSIS and they said, well, what can you tell us? You haven't told us anything. I remember when the report came out, the MPP in question, when this broke in November, they didn't name the MPP, but I said, I'm betting it's this man. And I went and I asked him, and he denied everything at the time. So I called contacting the Ford government. Well, he's no longer the chief of staff, so I'll say it was the Premier's chief of staff, Jamie Wallace. And I said, were you briefed on any of this? They said no. Later on, they got CSIS to give them a briefing. Ford, when he was answering questions, said, they didn't tell us much. He said, with CSIS, everything's a secret. Maybe that's true, but I have two issues here. One, CSIS should have gone to the provincial government beforehand. And when I've said before that this is going to hit across the country and all levels of government, you know, if I was Danielle Smith, if I was Dave Abbey, if I was Heather Stephenson or Scott Moe, I'd be calling up CSIS and saying, what do I need to be worried about? Because it turns out they're not alerting provincial governments when they have concerns, and they should be. Secondly, after Ford did find out, he should have acted. This gentleman was given a role of parliamentary assistant, so he's helping a cabinet minister with a cabinet file. That means they're close to information. He should have stepped aside from that and stepped aside from caucus immediately. Not because he's guilty. We don't know if any of these allegations are true, if any of these people are guilty, but you need to protect yourself. You need to protect the integrity of the thing. So CSIS should have warned the provincial government earlier here in Ontario, and Premier Ford should have acted sooner.
Okay. Brian, switching gears here, another group has announced that they're joining the Supreme Court challenge against Bill 69, which is also known as the No More Pipelines Bill. And that's the one that the Alberta Appeals Court struck down last year, right? So would you say that there's a growing pushback against this bill?
There is, and because of the way that the Trudeau government is dealing with the bill, trying to enact the bill, because even though the Alberta court struck it down, it's still, you know, it is in, they said it's unconstitutional, it's still being applied. And, you know, there was an announcement today about a housing project in Ontario, but they want to use this same bill to say, well, can that go ahead? Next door to you in Saskatchewan, there's power plants that Premier Moe wants to build. Saskatchewan is embracing wind and solar to a degree, but Premier Moe said a little while ago, we still need natural gas plants for baseload power for when the sun's not shining and when the wind's not blowing. And the federal government is saying, oh, well, I don't know if you can do that. So they've taken this bill C-69, and they've expanded its scope into every area of, if the environment can touch on it, the federal government wants to regulate it. And that would essentially remove provincial power over everything. So it's not just pipelines for Alberta, it's housing development for Alberta and Saskatchewan and Ontario and everywhere else. It's how your electricity grid is going to be built. Alberta still uses a lot of coal. Are they going to try and force you out of coal? Well, look, everyone does want to move away from coal to other sources of electricity, but how that will be done, is it going to be dictated by the federal government? So now you've got all 10 provinces signing on. I guess Alberta challenged it and won, but all 9 other provinces have signed on and said, we're backing Alberta. Think about that. That includes the NDP government in British Columbia. That includes the Liberal government in Newfoundland and Labrador. And now the Canadian Constitution Foundation is taking up the challenge as well, and they've hired lawyers to intervene. So we're expecting the case to come before the Supreme Court in the coming months, and it's going to be fascinating to watch. And, for me anyway, it may sound dry, but think about it. The federal government is trying to overtake pretty much every area of provincial and even municipal jurisdiction using an environmental assessment law. That is a bridge too far, as the Alberta Appeal Court said last year.
Yeah, it's such a huge issue, especially out here in the West, definitely. Okay, let's jump back onto the Prime Minister for a second here. So Justin Trudeau is someone who likes to preach about lowering your carbon footprint. Yet a new analysis is showing Trudeau's plane is often flying around empty. So how did this analysis come about, and how does this jive with his environmental claims?
Well, it's a former colleague of mine, Brian Pasfium, is with National Post now. He used to be with Toronto Sun, Calgary Sun. He's worked across the country, and he is an aviation junkie. He's one of these guys that plane watches. You've heard of train spotters and all of that. This guy watches the plane sites, and so often when you hear media talking about where Trudeau's taken off from or going to, it's because Brian Pasfium is tracking his plane, and he started noticing odd patterns. And I'll give you one example. Last week, the Prime Minister was he landed in Toronto, and rather than have him drive back, they flew the plane empty from Toronto to Kitchener to save the Prime Minister an hour's car ride. So the plane flying empty to save the Prime Minister driving time. But what's the carbon footprint of that? Well, for his jet, it's a lot bigger than for his SUV. So it doesn't jive with it at all. But with Justin Trudeau, it's about optics. It's not about reality. Is he telling you the right thing, Jeanette? You shouldn't take that cheap flight to Vegas. You shouldn't go on a vacation. You should stay home. Don't drive anywhere. Walk for your vacation. But him, he's going to fly all over. And oftentimes, and you can see the full details in Brian's report, it is an empty plane. Not all the time, but more than you would think and more than is healthy, especially when you preach the way the Prime Minister does.
Brian, thanks so much. It looks like we're out of time, but it's so great to have you on once again.
Thank you for having me.
As Albertans prepare for the May 29th provincial election, many are looking for truth and facts to make an informed and educated decision before they vote. The sharing of ideas and concepts are commonplace in our political dialogue. And today, we're going to hear from the Alberta First Party. Joining me today from Fernie, BC, doing a little bit of skiing to discuss the platform and goals of the party, is Alberta First Party leader Ed Callio. Ed, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thanks, Hal. Great to be here with you.
So, Ed, how would you describe the Alberta First Party? What is it really all about?
Singular focus, Hal. It's separation. We're getting a raw deal from Ottawa. We've tried every other avenue available to us within Confederation to get a better deal, and nothing's worked out. So we really need to get out of this mess called Confederation, and that's our focus at Alberta First.
So before we talk about what an independent state of Alberta would look like here, will you have candidates running in all of the Alberta ridings?
We need to get official party status, and so we would like to run at least half the candidates. We need 44 in order to achieve official party status, and so that's our goal. We have a number of candidates already, but we're short of that number. We're very much grassroots and just getting going here, Hal.
So if you were to achieve that official party status, how could you expect to compete against the big dogs like the UCP and the NDP?
Well, we just see that the UCP and the NDP are they're big tent, that they're likely to water down any leverage that Alberta has with the feds. We just don't think that even with the Sovereignty Act, for instance, that's enough of a stick to get a better deal for Alberta. And when you look at the numbers, they are absolutely stark. The amount of outflow from taxation, various transfers to the feds, and the amount that we get back as Albertans, it just doesn't add up. So that's why we need a singular focus. We need a big stick to go to Alberta, and that's to go to Ottawa with, and that's a referendum on separation. And that's the only way we're going to get a better deal and or separate. But separation is the goal.
Now, in the 2019 provincial election, it resulted in one of the highest voter turnouts since 1982 at about 68%, rising from 57% in 2015. Do you think we'll see that kind of engagement once again from Albertans?
Yes, I would expect to see a high level of engagement, Hal, again. I think that, Premier Kenney had made some promises going into the last election, which he didn't come through with. Then there was a change of leadership at the UCP with Danielle Smith taking over in her Sovereignty Act. I think that Albertans are focused. We're seeing increasingly an urban/rural divide. You're seeing clusters of NDP seats in the big cities, and then the rural areas are very much more conservative/UCP. And so I expect that voters are going to be absolutely focused on this election.
So when you're not on the ski hills, Ed, obviously you're doing some door knocking. What kind of feedback are you receiving from Albertans right now? What are some of their biggest concerns?
Well, the concerns are loss of control. They're seeing money going out. The cost of living is going up. The carbon taxation increases April 1st. There's a federal fuel standard coming as well. Costs are going up. We're getting less for it. There's less in our pockets. Our various levels of government, including the feds, provincial level, and municipal levels, are being driven by a top-down methodology, basically coming from the UN, which is these Sustainable Development Goals. And we're seeing our Prime Minister enacting those goals at the national level, and we even see it at the municipal levels. Calgary has passed that huge climate plan, which is, I think, $87 billion, which is a huge expenditure to enact those Sustainable Development Goals. I think Albertans want to take back control of their province, and rather than cede that control to an unelected body, which is globalist in nature.
Now, do you think perhaps the sentiment of wanting to separate from Canada from a lot of Albertans would wane if the Trudeau Liberals were voted out? Because Pierre Poilievre has said specifically, I mean, he grew up in Shaughnessy and Calgary. He's an Albertan at heart as well, even though he's a federalist, that he would support Alberta and especially a lot of our energy policies.
Yeah, I mean, we've got about we've got $60 billion going out every year to the feds in transfers, and we get 27 billion back. Is he going to fix that? Is he going to fix that 33 billion deficit, which amounts to $90 million a day net? It's $165 million gross going to Ottawa. Is he going to fix that? Is Poilievre going to stay in power past one mandate, for instance, and we end up with another federal government that's or NDP government that's globalist and they're leaning again? So we can't take that risk as Albertans. We need to drive this, and the only way to do it is to be serious about a referendum and separation. I call it speak softly and carry a big stick, and that's the stick.
So you think if we were to keep those transfer payments, we could really stand on our own, be a sovereign nation? What do you think an independent Alberta would really look like, Ed? Would we have our own money, our own police force, pension plan? How do you see it?
These policies are not set in stone by our party yet. We would need to have a policy convention. Say we were to form government or elect a number of NDP MLAs and hold the balance of power, for instance. Then it would be up to our membership to determine what kind of currency we would adopt, and all of those policies, those fiscal and the softer ones as well, social policies. And we're not at that stage yet. We have this singular focus, which is to separate. And we would trust in our membership and Albertans to come up with, a relevant and effective constitution, for instance, perhaps we would look at a different electoral methodology, get rid of first past the post. All of these things are up in the air, but we can do it. And we can, as a separate country, we can be best in class in all areas. We would have money for education. We can have the best universities. We would have control of our natural resources, which we don't now because of the, some of the federal legislation, such as Bill C-69 and C-48, where we can't get our hydrocarbons to Tidewater. These are world-class hydrocarbons. And we're seeing top-down control via, this environmental focus from the feds, the carbon focus, which is going to limit the use of fertilizers in our agricultural sector. So the two largest sectors in our economy are targets of the federal government, and we can't allow that to persist. So I look at the numbers. I've got a background in energy economics and a legal background. So I understand the constitutional underpinnings and the economics, and it's a crap deal for Alberta, and we need to get out.
Jason Kenney, when he was Premier, I chatted with him a few times, off air and on air, and he was saying the biggest issue, like you said, is the fact that we're landlocked, trying to get a lot of our products to Tidewater or oil. But then he also considered maybe working a deal somehow with BC to incorporate northern BC and get our oil out through that direction. What are your thoughts?
That can happen, but you've got a C-48 as a tanker moratorium on the west coast of British Columbia, north of Vancouver. So we're landlocked, basically, with respect to tanker traffic accessing any of those ports. And let's not forget that when the Gateway Pipeline was in its infancy and the talking stages, the ports up there, Prince Rupert and Kitimat, were fighting over being designated as the port that would be the terminus of the pipeline. So this complete narrative that the locals are all behind this tanker moratorium is, in my opinion, a lot of sophistry. There's a lot of support among the First Nations for these infrastructure projects. We're seeing the Coastal GasLink pipeline being built to take natural gas to Kitimat for the LNG Canada project. And I did a lot of work on those projects. I did the expert evidence for 17 of the LNG export license applications, all successful. And we are a hydrocarbon economy in Alberta and in Canada, as well as agriculture. And the end game of this current federal government is to shut us down.
Now, we talked about working with British Columbia about getting our product to Tidewater. How about maybe more central Canada and eastern Canada? Do you have maybe some thoughts on working with Quebec to develop the Energy East pipeline once again?
The Energy East pipeline, we took that concept. I cornered Ted Morton at a conference. And this was when Gateway and Keystone were very much up in the air. And I told Ted that Plan B would be to convert part of the Trans-Canada Mainline, which was underutilized, to oil, and take that oil to Tidewater. In fact, I gave him a chart on that. And then we approached Trans-Canada with it, and they took that concept and ran with it. And that's key to have access to East Coast Tidewater for our oil. So I'm a firm believer in that. The feds could do this overnight. They could designate an energy corridor, for instance, across the country, but they don't have the will to do it because, as I said, the end game is to shut us down because of the UN IPCC climate change, sustainable development goals that our feds have signed on to. So there's no willingness to do it. It could happen overnight. It could be designated in the national interest to have this corridor built over Quebec's protestations, I might add. It would be federal jurisdiction, and we could do it. And it would be in the national interest, I submit. But climate is the overriding criteria by which any of these infrastructure projects are judged right now. And that is a bad deal for Alberta.
Now, many in our province would argue that Alberta is the economic engine that really drives Canada. So do you think that the British Crown and the rest of Canada will let us go without a fight? And many would say that Alberta is a lot stronger being in Confederation.
You know, I was in the UK in 2016 when the Brexit vote happened. Two things happened in 2016. Donald Trump got in and the Brexit vote happened. And Britain's out. The UK is out of the European Union. Separation can happen. The federal government sent a reference case to the Supreme Court with respect to what conditions would be necessary for a province to separate. The Supreme Court rendered that decision. Then we had the federal government enact the Clarity Act. So the template is there. In my opinion, the Clarity Act does not comport really with the Supreme Court decision. It's a bit more onerous on a province, but it's still doable. I do not feel that the feds and the other provinces would have much say if a majority of Albertans on a clear question vote to separate. Then we've got a stick and we can negotiate those terms.
Alberta First Party leader Edward Kallio, thanks so much for joining us today from Fernie, British Columbia. Enjoy your time on the slopes.
Great, Hal. Nice to be with you this afternoon with your viewers and yourself. Thank you very much.
Thank you. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless. Thanks for watching.